He shattered through penthouse glass at midnight and found himself staring down a rifle barrel before the last shard hit the floor. The Korean Mafia boss who had ruled Seoul's criminal corridor for a decade, arriving like a storm, like a warning, like a man who had never once been stopped, frozen in place by a woman who had already calculated exactly where he would land. Before that night, she had just been an inconvenience. The Adebayo heiress sent to expand her family's empire into his city, moving through his territory with the quiet authority of someone who had never needed permission. He had watched her for 72 hours and decided she was manageable. That was when he made his first mistake. She wasn't manageable. She wasn't even surprised. 3 months after that standoff, a betrayal he ordered in secret would fracture the only alliance keeping both of them alive, and the same man who broke into her penthouse to threaten her would arrive uninvited to finish a battle she had already started alone. Somewhere between crossed rifles and crossed-out treaty clauses, without either of them planning it, they built the one thing neither empire ever trained them for. But trust between two people like this is the most dangerous thing in any room. And before the story ends, it will cost both of them everything. It began the night she landed in Seoul and looked at the penthouse glass and noted, clinically, that it was a vulnerability. She had no idea she was describing herself. The flight from Lagos to Seoul was 14 hours. Zaira Adebayo slept for exactly 4 of them. She spent the remaining 10 hours reading. Not novels. Not reports compiled by someone else. Primary documents, raw financial transfer records, organizational maps, a complete architectural layout of Seoul's underground criminal corridor. By the time the plane touched down at Incheon International, she had read every page twice and committed the critical figures to memory. She did not need to write things down. Writing things down was for people who didn't trust themselves. Her security detail, 6 men, all trained by her father's head of operations, moved through the terminal around her like water around stone. She was the fixed point. They adjusted. This was how it had always been. From the age of 14, when her father first brought her into a negotiation room and told her to observe, she had understood that power was not something you performed. It was something you maintained through absolute stillness while everyone else moved. Seoul in January was gray and cold and enormous. She noted the traffic patterns from the car window the same way she noted everything. Not with admiration, not with judgment, simply with precision. Every detail was data. Data was leverage. Leverage was survival. The penthouse suite occupied the entire 53rd floor of a luxury tower in Gangnam. Her people had swept it 48 hours before her arrival. Secure. Clean. Sightlines confirmed. She walked through the space once, slowly, touching nothing, cataloging everything. The kitchen. The study. The main room with its floor-to-ceiling windows running the full length of the south wall. She stopped at the glass. From here, the city spread in every direction, a glittering grid of controlled chaos that someone, somewhere, believed they owned. Her intelligence packet included a full dossier on Kang Min-jae, alias the Glass Reaper. 31 years old. 12 years at the head of Seoul's most consolidated criminal network. Known for eliminating rivals not through warfare but through strategic absorption. He didn't destroy competing organizations, he swallowed them. His scarring ran along the left side of his jaw, a souvenir from the night 8 years ago, when he had survived an assassination attempt that killed 4 of his lieutenants and emerged the following morning to dismantle the family responsible within 72 hours. She had read this dossier in 4 minutes on the plane. In the 5th minute, she had identified a gap in his organizational structure that his own intelligence team appeared to have missed. A pressure point in his eastern supply corridor that left him exposed to precisely the kind of quiet infiltration the Adebayo expansion represented. She did not share this observation with anyone. She filed it away behind her eyes, where she kept everything that mattered. Her lieutenant, Emika, appeared in the doorway. Network contact confirmed for tomorrow morning. Advanced team is already in position across 3 districts. Tell them to hold position, she said. Don't move on anything until I've reviewed the updated corridor maps personally. Yes, ma'am. And Emika. She didn't turn from the window. The glass on this wall. Make a note of it. He paused. A vulnerability? Everything is a vulnerability until it isn't, she said. Make a note. She stood at the window a long time after he left. The city shimmered below her. Somewhere in that grid, Kang Min-jae was already aware she was here. She had calculated that he would have known within 6 hours of her landing. That was fine. She wanted him to know. She wanted him to watch. Watching was what people did when they were trying to understand something they hadn't encountered before. Let him watch. She turned from the glass and went to work. He had watched her for 72 hours before he decided the direct approach was the only language she would respect. Kang Min-jae had built his entire operation on one foundational principle: information before action. He never moved without knowing the terrain. He never entered a room without having mapped every exit. He never engaged an opponent without understanding at a cellular level what they valued and what they feared. 72 hours of surveillance on Zaira Adebayo had given him her schedule, her security formation, her communication patterns, and her operational rhythm. What it had not given him was a single exploitable weakness. She didn't move carelessly. She didn't have unguarded moments. She didn't make mistakes. This was, he decided, a problem that required a personal solution. His team mapped the penthouse layout from the building schematics filed with the city 11 years earlier. The south wall glass was the entry point, high enough to be unexpected, accessible from the adjacent tower's maintenance scaffolding with the right equipment, and in direct sight line of the main room where she spent her working hours. He went alone. This was not recklessness. This was a message. If he arrived with a team, it was a threat. If he arrived alone, it was a statement. I don't need an army for you. The entry was clean. He hit the glass moving and was through it before the momentum died, landing in a controlled drop with his handgun extended, suit torn at the shoulder, the night air pouring in behind him through the shattered frame, and found himself staring into a rifle scope. She hadn't moved from her position at the far end of the room. She was standing, not crouching, not braced, simply standing with the assault rifle raised and her eye on the optic sight and her shoulders perfectly squared. Her gold bracelets caught the low light. Her expression did not change. He had trained himself over 12 years to never show surprise. In this moment, training saved him. The silence lasted 4 full seconds. You mapped the south wall, he said. 3 days ago, she said. I noted it as a vulnerability. Another silence. Glass crunched faintly under his foot as he shifted his weight. This is my city, he said. His voice was level. Was always level. Emotion was a weapon you only deployed when you controlled its direction. Whatever your family told you about this corridor, they were operating on outdated information. It belongs to my network. It has belonged to my network for 7 years. Your network controls 63% of the corridor, she said. The remaining 37% is ungoverned. We're not taking your territory, Min-jae. We're filling the gap you left. He had not given her permission to use his name. He noted that she had used it anyway. He filed this. There is no gap, he said. There is. Page 41 of your own logistics documentation. Your eastern distribution has a 14-month-old dead zone running through 3 districts. You haven't filled it because you haven't needed to. We have. She lowered the rifle, not completely, not as a concession but as a recalibration of threat distance. I'm not here to take what's yours. I'm here to build in the space you abandoned. He studied her for a long moment. She met the study without flinching. Most people, under his direct attention, found somewhere else to look. She did not look away. She looked at him the way he looked at floor plans, calmly, systematically, looking for the load-bearing elements. He didn't like that. He also couldn't stop doing it back. You have 1 week, he said finally. Show me the Adebayo Network's operational plan for the eastern districts. If it touches my infrastructure, this conversation ends differently than it's starting. Agreed, she said. Use the door on your way out. He turned and left through the door. It was, he recognized even then, in a cold, analytical part of his mind, the only exit that didn't feel like retreat. She had rearranged the room's sight lines. At some point in the last 90 seconds she had used his own momentary stillness to put herself between him and every other option. He walked to the elevator and waited for it in silence. She was not what the dossier said. The ceasefire lasted exactly 72 hours. Then both networks began to move. It was not a war that anyone watching from outside would have recognized as a war. There were no street confrontations. No public displays of force. What happened instead was quieter and far more precise. A systematic campaign of strategic displacement conducted entirely through proxies, paperwork, and the pressure applied to the right person at the right moment. Zaira rerouted 3 of the Adebayo network's primary supply lines through the eastern dead zone, moving with a speed that suggested she had planned the route months before she landed in Seoul. Her advanced team embedded quietly into 2 of the corridor's key distribution nodes. Contacts who had previously operated independently found, within 48 hours, that the Adebayo organization was a better business partner than they had been offered before. Min-jae watched this and adapted. He closed 2 of the pressure points she was using before she could fully exploit them. He reinforced the edges of his network in the eastern districts, Not aggressively, not visibly, but with the steady, incremental addition of personnel that signaled consolidation rather than expansion. He was too experienced to overreact. Overreaction was the signature of men who were afraid. He was not afraid. He was recalibrating. What surprised him, and he noted this surprise with the same clinical precision he noted everything, was the speed at which she moved. She wasn't reacting to his counter-moves. She was already past them, operating on assumptions about his response before he had made it, building 3 steps into a future she had apparently already mapped. He had to work harder than he was accustomed to working to stay even with her. He told Miho this. Not as an admission. As data. She's operating on pre-built contingencies, he said. Every move I've made this week, she had a response already staged. She mapped my decision tree before she got off the plane. Miho was quiet for a moment. What does that mean for our position? It means she's very good, Min-jae said. And it means I've been underestimating the timeline. Across the city, Zyra sat with Emika and reviewed the week's progress with the same calm she brought to everything. He's faster than the dossier projected, she said. Significantly, Emika agreed. Update the projection models. Build in a 15% acceleration on his response times and adjust our staging accordingly. She pulled the corridor map across the table. He's not overextending. He's not making emotional decisions. He's operating from pure strategic logic. She paused. That makes him predictable. And it makes him useful, if we can ever align the logic. Emika looked at her. You're considering working with him? I'm considering every option, she said. That's what I always do. 3 days later, the first Volkov killing hit both of their intelligence networks simultaneously. A mid-level distribution coordinator, a man who had operated independently between both networks, supplying services to each without formal allegiance to either, was found dead in his office in Mapo District. The method was professional. The timing was precise. And when Zyra pulled the man's full contact history, she found 3 more names. People connected to Min-jae's Eastern infrastructure, all of whom had gone dark in the past 10 days. She pulled their files. Cross-referenced the methods. Sat very still for a long time. This was not Min-jae's work. The signature was wrong, too clean, too patient, with none of the territorial messaging that accompanied his network's operations. Someone else had been moving through the corridor while both empires were focused on each other. She sent Emika to pull every unattributed incident in the Seoul corridor in the past 6 months. By midnight, the picture was complete. They were not alone in this city. And whatever was hunting them had been hunting them long before either of them arrived. She worked through the night. By 4 in the morning, she had a full map of the Volkov Syndicate's Seoul operation spread across the war room table. Not a guess, not a theory, but a documented, cross-referenced intelligence picture assembled from shipping records, financial transfer anomalies, unattributed deaths, and the careful pattern left by an organization that was very good at not leaving patterns. The Volkov Syndicate was a Russian criminal network that had been operating in East Asia for 11 years. They were not new to Seoul. What was new was their ambition. For the past decade, they had existed on the corridor's margins, taking small cuts from independent operators, avoiding confrontation with established networks, building quietly. 6 months ago, something had changed. They began eliminating the independent infrastructure that connected Seoul's criminal corridor, not claiming it, not replacing it, simply removing it. They were creating a vacuum. And the 2 networks best positioned to respond to a vacuum, the Atabeo organization and Kang Min-jae's empire, had spent the past 2 weeks entirely focused on each other. She understood immediately what this meant. It was elegant, in the brutal way that only genuinely patient strategy could be elegant. The Volkov Syndicate had not created the conflict between their 2 networks. They had simply waited for it, accelerated it with careful pressure, and used its heat to move unseen while both sides burned their attention on each other. She sat with this for 2 hours. Then she did the calculation. Her network alone could not neutralize the Volkov operation. Not in the timeline she was working with, not without absorbing losses that would compromise the Atabeo family's sole position for years. The mathematics were clear and uncomfortable. The only viable option was the one she least preferred. She reached out to Min-jae through a secure encrypted channel at 6 in the morning. The message was 4 lines. She had written it in 8 minutes and spent 42 minutes editing it down to its absolute operational core. Volkov Syndicate. Active in your eastern corridor for 6 months. They've been engineering our conflict. I have full documentation. This is not a negotiation, it's a briefing. You have 12 hours to respond before I proceed without you. She sent it and went to make coffee. He appeared at the penthouse door 40 minutes later. Not a response through the channel. In person. Through the door, not the window. She noted this without showing that she noted it. He was in a dark suit, no tie, and he had the look of a man who had not slept but would not admit this to anyone, including himself. She let him in. She pointed to the war room table. He looked at what was spread across it and said nothing for 3 full minutes. "How long did this take you?" he said finally. "One night." He looked at her then. Not the territorial assessment of their first meeting. Something else. Something more careful. "My intelligence team has been looking at the Eastern Corridor losses for 3 weeks, he said. They flagged them as unrelated incidents. They were looking for a network signature, she said. The Volkov team doesn't leave one. They leave absences. You have to map what's missing, not what's there. Another silence. "What do you want?" he said. "A joint operation. Shared intelligence access. Combined strike teams for the critical targets. Equal decision authority on operational timing." She handed him a single sheet, a proposed framework, clean and precise. "The math is simple. Neither of us can do this alone without losses we can't absorb. Together we can end it in 3 weeks. He read the framework. He read it again. He set it down. "Equal decision authority," he repeated. "Non-negotiable," she said. He picked up a pen from the table. He made one small notation in the margin, a structural adjustment to the strike team allocation that she read upside down and recognized immediately as tactically sound. Then he set the pen down. 3 weeks, he said. 3 weeks, she confirmed. She extended her hand. He looked at it for a moment, not with hesitation, but with the careful deliberateness of a man who understood that a handshake between people like them was not a formality. It was a contract written in something more binding than paper. He shook it. The war room hummed around them. Outside the window, Seoul moved through its morning, indifferent. And somewhere in the city, the Volkov syndicate continued to move through the gap, unaware that the gap had just closed. The first week of the joint operation was purely professional. They worked in shifts, his team in the war room from 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, her team from 4 until midnight, with a 2-hour overlap where both of them were present simultaneously, and the room ran at a different temperature than it did at any other time. Not warmer. Not colder. Simply more charged, the particular atmospheric quality of 2 high-pressure systems occupying the same space. They disagreed often. Efficiently. Without ego, or rather, with ego held in perfect check because both of them were too disciplined to let it cost them operationally. She challenged his timeline on the first Volkov supply line strike and ran the numbers to demonstrate a 48-hour acceleration was achievable. He reviewed her numbers, found one variable she had underweighted, corrected it, and found that the corrected figure still supported her timeline by a margin of 6 hours. He incorporated this without comment. She noted that he incorporated it without comment and filed this away. He challenged her strike team formation for the second target, 2 exposed on the eastern exit. She looked at the layout, ran the alternative he proposed, and found that his formation closed the exposure but created a secondary gap. She showed him the gap. He redesigned the formation. It was better than either version. They submitted it jointly. This pattern established itself within 4 days. Challenge, correction, synthesis, improvement. Neither conceded to the other. Both conceded to the better answer. It was, in its way, the most functional working relationship either of them had ever had. The nights in the overlap window were different. It happened gradually, the way genuinely significant things always happen, not in a single moment but in the accumulation of small ones. The work would be done. The briefings complete. And neither of them would leave. They would sit on opposite sides of the war room table with the corridor maps between them and talk, not about the operation but around it. About strategy in the abstract. About the nature of organizations and what made them hold together or fall apart. About the decisions that defined empires and the ones that quietly destroyed them. He told her once about the assassination attempt that left the scar on his jaw. Not the facts of it, those were in her dossier. The decision he made afterward. The 12 hours he had spent alone before he moved, figuring out not just how to respond but what kind of leader he wanted to be when it was over. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Most people would have moved immediately. Most people don't survive what comes after immediately," he said. She looked at him across the maps for a moment. "My father used to say, the first move is emotion. The second move is ego. The third move is strategy. Wait for the third. Your father sounds like someone worth knowing." "He was the most dangerous man I ever knew," she said. "Until recently." She did not clarify what she meant. She did not need to. The second week, the operation accelerated. 3 Volkov supply nodes dismantled. 2 key coordinators neutralized. The syndicate's leadership began to respond, tightening their formation, pulling assets back toward their core infrastructure. This was expected. This was in fact what both of them had planned for. What they had not planned for was the third week. Or what happened in it? The strike on the Volkov network's primary Seoul hub required full coordination. Every asset from both networks, synchronized timing, a 6-hour window. They spent 4 days planning it. 72 hours before the operation, Min-jae sat in the war room at 2 in the morning reviewing the final formation, and Zaira walked in an hour after she was supposed to have left. She sat down across from him. She looked at the plan. She found 2 things she wanted to check. They worked for another 2 hours. Then the work was done and the room was very quiet and neither of them moved to leave. "You're good at this," he said. It was not a compliment framed to please her. It was an observation offered with the same precision he brought to tactical assessments. This was, she recognized, the only kind of compliment either of them knew how to give or trust. "I know," she said. The city glittered beyond the window. The clock showed 4 a.m. She left at 4:07. He sat in the empty room for a while after that, looking at the plan, not changing anything. 2 days later, he ordered the data extraction. He told himself it was standard protocol. He told himself this 3 times. The anomaly was 47 bytes. In a data transfer log running to over 400,000 lines, a 47-byte ghost packet, a shadow signature left by a clean extraction program that had been designed to leave nothing. If the extraction had been run against any other network's data architecture, it would have been invisible. But Zaira had designed the Adebayo network's data structure herself, and she knew every load-bearing element the way a builder knows the bones of a house they assembled by hand. She found it at 11 in the morning. She sat with it for 6 hours. The extraction had pulled everything: account architecture, contact maps, financial corridors, operational chain of command, the pressure points and vulnerabilities of the Adebayo network laid out in complete detail. Whoever had it could use it to replicate the network, undercut it, or dismantle it at will. The method was Min-jae's team's signature. She recognized it the way you recognize someone's handwriting, not because it was labeled but because it carried the particular quality of the mind behind it. She understood immediately why he had done it. If the alliance fractured, he wanted leverage. It was, in purely operational terms, a logical move. It was exactly what she would have considered. The difference was that she had considered it and rejected it, because she had calculated what it would cost and determined the cost was too high. He had made a different calculation. And now she knew, with absolute clarity, exactly what she was worth to him when weighed against the instinct to control. She sat in the war room a long time. There was a version of this that ended with a direct confrontation. She mapped it. It would be satisfying in the short term and corrosive in the long term, because a confrontation assumed that his decision could be reversed, that an apology or an explanation could reassemble what the extraction had quietly dismantled. Trust was not a wall you could repair with the same materials it had been built from. Once broken this way, it became something different. She thought about what her father had told her. The first move is emotion. The second move is ego. The third move is strategy. Wait for the third. Her third move was to leave. She briefed Emika, pulled the shared intelligence access, removed her team from the war room, left nothing behind except the corridor maps they had built together, which she could not take because they were also his. She sent no message, no explanation, no confrontation. She was gone before midnight. The Volkov syndicate moved within 48 hours. As if they had been watching the alliance for fracture lines. As if they had been waiting for exactly this gap. 3 of Min-jae's distribution nodes went dark in the same night. His network absorbed the losses with the efficiency of an organization that had been built to absorb impact. But the efficiency had a cost, and the cost was visible to anyone who knew where to look. He was stretched. And he was stretched because the strategic site that had been closing his blind spots for 3 weeks had walked out without a word. At hour 73, she received intelligence through a channel she hadn't given him. He had found it anyway. The message was one line. "Where are you?" Not a question. A statement of a problem that didn't have a clean solution. She read it and did not respond. But she did not delete it either. Min-jae ran the operation for 11 days without her. He was good at this. He had been doing it for 12 years and he was, by any objective measure, exceptional at it. His network held. His people moved with precision. The losses the Volkov network had inflicted were absorbed and responded to with enough force to stabilize the situation and prevent further escalation. He was winning. In the narrow technical sense of the word, he was winning. He sat in the war room every night and reviewed the intelligence feeds and made the decisions that needed to be made, and every night the work took longer than it used to, and he told himself this was because the Volkov operation had grown more complex as it contracted, which was true. This was also not the entire truth. On the fourth night, he pulled the corridor maps they had built together and laid them over the current intelligence picture. He followed her reasoning through the layers of the plan, the contingency routes, the pressure points she had flagged, the 3 alternative strike formations she had outlined for scenarios that hadn't materialized yet. He found 2 places where the current operation was moving toward an outcome she had already identified as suboptimal and had quietly steered away from during the overlap hours. He had not noticed the steering at the time. He noticed it now. He called Miho at midnight. "Pull the logs from the second week of the joint operation," he said. "The strike team formations. Every version." Miho pulled them. They went through the evolution of the plans together, version by version, revision by revision. The pattern was clear once you looked for it. Her contributions had not simply improved individual elements. They had been building a structural framework across the entire operation that made each piece more resilient in relation to every other piece. She was doing 3 things simultaneously, Min-jae said. She was solving the immediate tactical problem. She was building for 2 weeks ahead. And she was doing both of those things while leaving me enough ownership of the decisions that I wouldn't recognize the architecture until she was gone. Miho said nothing for a moment. Then, did she do that intentionally? No, Min-jae said. That's just how she works. He was quiet for a long time. The data extraction, he said finally. Miho said nothing. This too was its own kind of answer. I calculated the strategic value of the information, Min-jae said. I did not calculate the strategic value of the person it belonged to. He set down the map he was holding. Those are not the same calculation. Outside, Seoul moved through its night. Somewhere in the city, Zaira Adebayo was running her own operation, because of course she was. She had not left the field. She had simply left his field. And she was too good and too invested in the outcome to walk away from the Volkov problem simply because she had walked away from him. 3 days after that conversation, a single piece of intelligence arrived on his encrypted line. High precision. Targeting data for the Volkov network's primary Seoul hub. The final target, the one they had been building toward for 3 weeks. It was the best intelligence he had received in the entire operation. It was exactly what he needed. There was no sender identified. But he recognized the architecture of it. He had spent 3 weeks learning to recognize her architecture. He called Miho again. "Get everyone ready. We move in 72 hours. Are we coordinating with?" "She'll be there," he said. He didn't know this. But he had learned, in 11 days, to trust her judgment even in her absence. And her judgment, delivered through that anonymous intelligence packet, said, "The window is now." He was going to trust it. She moved on the Volkov hub at 0200 hours. She had rebuilt the strike plan from the ground up in the 2 weeks since she left the war room, not because the original plan was wrong, but because a plan built for 2 organizations could not be executed by one without complete reconstruction. She had taken what was his, what was hers, and what was theirs, and she had kept only what she could carry alone. Her team hit 3 entry points simultaneously. Plain. Precise. No room for adjustment, no margin for error, the way all genuinely difficult things are done when you have stripped them down to their essential components and removed everything that was there for comfort rather than function. For 11 minutes it was working. Then the eastern exit closed. The Volkov network had adjusted their security formation in the past 72 hours. A small change, a single additional team repositioned in the building's service corridor. Not enough to stop the operation. Enough to close the exit she needed for her extraction route. Her team could complete the strike. They could not complete it and get out cleanly. She was calculating alternatives when Min-jae came through the eastern corridor. Not with his full network. He had brought 12 people. His best 12, moving fast and quiet through the service corridor with the kind of coordinated efficiency that required no communication because everyone in the formation had run the scenario enough times to know their position without being told. He didn't speak to her. She didn't speak to him. There was no moment of reunion, no acknowledgement of the 11 days or the breach or the absence. There was a closing formation, a restored exit route, and a strike operation that resumed with its full architecture intact. They moved through the Volkov hub together with the particular precision of people who had spent 3 weeks learning each other's rhythm. He covered the positions she had left exposed. She closed the gaps his formation created on the right flank. They did not discuss this. They simply did it, The way you breathe, the way you balance, the way the body makes 10,000 microcorrections every second without consulting the mind because some knowledge lives below language. The Volkov network's sole operation was over in 38 minutes. They stood in the silence after, in a cleared room on the 14th floor of what had been the syndicate's primary hub, with the sounds of their teams completing the final sweep around them. The city was quiet outside. Both of them were still. Both of them were the particular kind of tired that has nothing to do with physical exertion. He looked at her. She looked at him. You closed the eastern exit, she said. You sent me the targeting data, he said. Pause. That wasn't forgiveness, she said. That was operational necessity. I know, he said. Another pause. Longer. You made a calculation, she said. You calculated the intelligence value of what you took. You didn't calculate the cost. No, he said. I didn't. She held his gaze for a long moment. In her gold bracelets, in the squared set of her shoulders, in the absolute stillness of her expression, all the armor she had built across 26 years of being told she was the empire, the weapon, the heiress who could not afford to be anything softer. The cost, she said carefully, was everything we'd built. I know that now, he said. I knew it when you were gone. The sweep teams moved through the floors around them. Seoul glittered beyond the windows. And the two people standing in the wreckage of a war they had finished together did not move for a long time, not toward each other, not away, simply occupying the same space, which was its own kind of beginning. She went back to the penthouse 3 days later. She had thought about it carefully, not whether to go back but what going back meant. She was not a woman who made decisions by accident. Every move carried intention. If she walked into that penthouse and sat down across from him, she was choosing something. She needed to be clear about what she was choosing before she chose it. What she was choosing was this: the possibility that what they had built in the war room, the operational rhythm, the mutual respect, the 2 a.m. conversations about strategy and empire and what made things hold together, was not the accident. That the breach was the accident. That who he had been in that room, deferring to the better answer regardless of who offered it, building something neither of them could have built alone, that was the more accurate version of him than the man who ordered the extraction. She was not certain she was right. She was certain enough to find out. The treaty document was on the table when she arrived. She knew he had written it because it was waiting for her, not presented with ceremony, simply there, as if he had left it and walked away, as if he understood that she would not want him watching her read it. She read every clause. The framework proposed a joint Seoul corridor authority, equal governance, equal access, equal liability. No extraction clauses. No asymmetric information rights. A shared accountability structure with a dispute resolution protocol built on the same challenge and synthesis model they had arrived at organically in the war room. It was, she recognized, a document written by someone who had studied how they worked together and tried to codify it. It was also, she found 3 things immediately, imperfect. She took a pen from the table. She crossed out Clause 7, which gave each party unilateral exit rights with 60 days' notice. Too short, and the wrong framing entirely. An exit clause built for a transaction, not a partnership. She rewrote it, mutual exit requiring a 90-day wind-down protocol and a joint review. She struck the asset valuation methodology in Clause 12 and replaced it with a framework she had used in the Adebayo organization's West African expansion agreements. She added a clause he hadn't included, a shared intelligence obligation, both parties required to disclose threats to the joint operation within 24 hours of identification. She read the document once more. Then she set down the pen. He came in from the study. He had clearly been waiting, not hovering, not watching but present in the space. He sat down across from her and picked up the document and read her revisions in silence. She watched him read. His expression did the same thing it always did when she offered a better answer. A small, precise stillness that lasted about 2 seconds before he integrated the information and moved forward. It was the least performative response she had ever seen from anyone. She had come to understand that this was the highest compliment he knew how to offer. He set down the document. He picked up the pen. He signed. He slid it back across the table. She signed. The city existed beyond the window. The night was clear. Seoul's grid of lights ran in every direction below the 53rd floor, and for a moment neither of them said anything, simply sitting in the particular quiet of something completed. The Eastern Corridor, he said finally. We'll need to reconstruct 3 of the distribution nodes the Volkov team dismantled. I've already drafted a rebuild framework, she said. It's in the shared drive. I know, he said. I read it this morning. Pause. It's good, he said. I know, she said. Something that was almost a smile crossed his face. It was brief. She did not remark on it. She filed it away behind her eyes, where she kept everything that mattered. They stood together at the window. The penthouse glass, replaced after the night he shattered it, was flawless now without a scratch. The same view. The same city. The same two people who had arrived in this space from entirely different directions and found, at the barrel of a rifle and in the wreckage of a long night's work, that the only other person in Seoul who thought the way they thought was the one they had both been trying to outmaneuver. Same window, he said. Different people, she said. Below them, Seoul breathed and glittered and moved through its night, indifferent and magnificent, belonging to no one and therefore, at least in the ways that mattered, to them. Two empires. One corridor. And the most dangerous thing either of them had ever built. Not a network, not a strike team, not a war room full of maps and contingencies, but the quiet, hard-won, irreversible knowledge that they were stronger together than either of them had ever been alone. This is not a story about falling in love. It is a story about the thing that makes love, real love between people built like this, possible at all. Zyra was trained to be impenetrable. Min-jae was trained to win. And what this story demonstrates, slowly and at great operational cost, is that impermeability is not strength, it is rigidity. And winning is not power, it is habit. Real strength is the capacity to be changed by something true. Real power is knowing when to share it. Min-jae's betrayal was not an act of malice. It was the automatic response of a man whose entire identity was built around control, around never being in a position where he needed something he didn't own. He extracted the data because he could not yet imagine a world where not having leverage over Zyra was acceptable. That failure of imagination cost him everything he had built with her. What he learned in the 11 days she was gone was the lesson that all people who are built for dominance must eventually learn. You cannot control what you most need. You can only earn it. And earning it requires becoming someone who deserves it. Zyra's lesson was different and equally hard. She had been so committed to strategy, to the third move, to never acting from emotion, that she had almost missed the thing the strategy was for. She sent him the targeting data. She came back to the penthouse. She picked up the pen. These were not strategic decisions. They were decisions made from a deeper kind of knowing, the knowledge that what they had built in that war room was worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth the risk of being wrong. The empire survives. It survives because two people who were never built to yield to anyone chose, with full understanding of the cost, to yield to something larger than either of them, to the better answer, to the shared mission, to the version of themselves that only existed when the other one was in the room. That is what this story is about. The most dangerous thing you will ever attempt is not a war. It is trust. And the most powerful thing you will ever build is not an empire. It is the person brave enough to build it beside you. If this story moved you, subscribe, share it with someone who needs it, and turn on notifications. The next story is already coming.